We have reached on to page 22, and the author begins by saying, an intelligent and discerning person is the one who meticulously perfects his deeds to ensure his state of affairs becomes upright and his circumstances improve. Meaning, if a person, for example, had to open a business, or a person had to undertake some sort of project, or a person had to undertake some sort of task, especially if they are going on a lifelong task. A person is now opening up a business for which they hope will help them for the rest of their life. They don't just go about it doing haphazardly. They plan, they strategize, they study, right? And then they go about on this task. And likewise, just as a person in their life, when something is important to them, won't do anything haphazardly, in the spiritual path, a wise person does not go about the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala haphazardly, just doing anything that comes to their mind, or just doing whatever is told to them, or meaning if they come across anything on social media, they read this, they read that, they're taking things from here and there. A person has to be strategic, and a person has to be also methodological in how they approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this regard, Allah would say, حُرِمَ الْوُصُولِ بِتَضْيِيعِهُمُ الْأُصُولِ. Referring to the common people or those who flounder in their spirituality, is that they were prevented from reaching their goal because they neglected the foundations. And we know that any foundations or any building, any structure whose foundations are not sound, then the entire building will soon collapse. In this regard, Imam al-Haddad also mentions, and he says, people that perhaps have been negligent in their lives and they've not been brought up in households or homes or societies in which spirituality was part of their daily life. And when spirituality is part of the daily life, if a person is brought up and tahajjud is something normal for him, the morning adhkar, the evening adhkar after each and every salah, lessons at particular times, then we find these people don't have to do an abundant amount of dhikr. But because they've been consistent on it from a young age and brought up, the effect now on their spirituality is sound. They have these good foundations. They have much more free time to do other things. For example, teaching, da'wah, etc. And spirituality is part of their life. However, one of Shaitan's plots and ploys for people who have been negligent is when they decide to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he makes them want to do too much at one time. So a person thinks about their life and how negligent they have been, and they have not been doing adhkar, and their age might be 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 or even 60 for that matter. Now this person wants to start reading, for example, the whole khalasa in one day, and they want to start doing khatam upon khatam of Quran. Whereas this person, if you are starting with your spirituality at the age of 30 or 40 or 50, you have to start as if you were a baby steps. So you start with, for example, in this particular methodology, we say start with the Wird al-Latif, start with Surah Yasin in the morning, and maintain that for a period of time. Once your person has maintained that for a period of time, here period of time can mean at least a couple of months, in which now it's become part of your system. It becomes the bread and butter of your adhkar. Now you start adding slowly. Or a person can do what's in their capacity, but they never go below this bare minimum, because one of Shaitan's plots is to give you the enthusiasm to do a lot, but what happens is after a couple of weeks, couple of months, person is worn out. It's just like gymming or exercise. If you do too much, you jump into it too much, your body is not going to be able to handle it. So the first and foremost concern for a servant in his spiritual journey should be to purify and refine his lower self. Has been about. And unfortunately, many people don't pay attention to this order of how the purification of the heart or the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be. The first and foremost concern for a servant in his spiritual journey should be to purify and refine his lower self, his nafs, his ego, to get rid of the ego, the pride, the arrogance, the malice, the jealousy, the hatred, and to attain all the positive qualities. And we mentioned in the previous lessons, the easiest and quickest way for a person to do that is to start doing menial tasks. And we have to call ourselves to account from our last lessons till today. Have we actually consciously taken up any menial tasks which were difficult on our nafs for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for the sake of putting down, breaking this ego? The author says, for a wayfarer, meaning for someone on the spiritual path, this takes precedence over increasing voluntary acts of worships, such as extra prayer and fasting. For it is improper for a servant to approach Allah the Exalted with a filthy heart and unpurified self. And this also can be written in gold. And this also is one of the foundational rules of this book, and also about the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is unfortunately something which many people in certain parts of the world might not even know about. In Tareem, for example, or in the place where these ulama and awliya are living, this is known. And there is not an emphasis for young students, for new students, on an abundance of worship over and above a person wanting to purify the heart. The first things people are concerned about are the books. And you'd find the student carrying the book. Habib Umar has summarized the Qabs Nur Mubin, the third volume of the Ihya Ulumuddin, which deals with the destructive qualities. In the past, a person, the only book or the first book that you'd see him carrying was this book. And in all his free time, he'd be going through the book, because it speaks about how to purify the heart from anger, how to break the desires of the stomach, all the spiritual diseases. And as much as you would generally see a person when they want to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reading Quran and doing dhikr, they would be holding this book, studying this book. Even in Darul Mustafa, in the rooms, the students, perhaps no matter what level they were on, this book was read every evening before the students go to sleep in their dormitories, so that even if there are new students that have come, they are being made aware. And there was also this understanding of students asking other students that, please do inform me, do let me know about anything that you see in my character or in myself that I need to work on. People would even go, generally the mashayikh, they would even go to the mashayikh and ask the mashayikh. But the way of the mashayikh is they won't tell people in their face what their spiritual diseases are. They would again refer them back to the books and say, read this book or read this particular chapter in this particular book. And this is very, very, very important, meaning there is an intellectual aspect to an approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of picking up the book and reading. If I realize I'm someone who gets angry, that anger is not going to go away by wishful thinking. The anger won't go away even by making dua alone if a person is not doing the hard work. Meaning a person needs to understand what is anger, how it affects a person, read the stories, go through the book, and it's almost like a manual. And some people approach their spirituality like, if we can imagine, spirituality or the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like flying a space shuttle. So what do? They get into the space shuttle, they just see numbers and knobs and levers and whatever, and they start fiddling around. Hopefully something's going to happen, and they're hoping it's going to take off. What happens? They might blow themselves up, which might happen. Or they sit for years and years and years. And we find this also sometimes with people. Okay, buys a new device or something, and he's too lazy to read the manual. So what is he doing? He starts fiddling around, hoping something's going to happen, and it's going to get fixed up. Until he's humble enough and says, you know what, I just need to take the manual and read. And exactly the same thing was our approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to pick up these books. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifested people like Imam Ghazali and Imam al-Haddad and made their books so famous, right? Because above that being the manual, there is immense barakah, and there's the immense nur in these books. So a wise person, before he even gets into the space shuttle, right, he'll first ask for the manual, he'll try and read it, he'll speak to people who might have. And the easiest way is to find someone who can take you by the hand and show you, right? Or someone who has already done it and he shows you exactly how it needs to work. Otherwise, you're going to be trial and erroring. And in the past, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trial and error can work for some people, but it can also be very, very detrimental. Because if your nafs, for example, starts getting lazy and gives up on the spiritual path because you think it's too difficult, and it's never difficult just because a person hasn't used the correct approach. But if the nafs gets tired, it's very difficult to bring it back. And the spiritual path needs to be continuous himma and determination. You can't leave yourself negligent for even an instant. But because there needs to be this continuous determination, a person also needs to be in a good state, a moderate state, right, or moderate pace, and they are constantly growing. And a person also has checks and balances for when they fall. So for a wayfarer, this takes precedence over increasing voluntary acts of worship such as extra praise and fasting, for it is improper for a servant to approach Allah the Exalted with filthy heart and unpurified self. Doing so would be exhausting himself in what may ultimately lead to retrogression. Without clear insight into his affairs, a person is likely to become perplexed, which may lead to a decline and reversal in his spiritual state. And this is exactly the example that we gave. Meaning, a person, when they need to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing they need to do is stop and think, right? And ask themselves, what have I been doing in my life? What are my spiritual diseases? And a person won't know until they actually pick up the book. And that is why Imam Ghazali wrote a book called Beginning of Guidance. Meaning people who are starting the path, they start with this book. It's called Beginning of the Guidance, or Beginning of Guidance, Bidayatul Hidayah. Right? And this is not the book some people confuse. They think Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya is a book by Ibn Kathir, and it deals with history. It's a very voluminous work, maybe 10, 12 volumes, depending which print a person has. But Bidayatul Hidayah is the beginning of guidance. It's a very small, succinct book by Imam Ghazali, where he gives a person an entry into the spiritual path, the bare basics of adhkar, which a person ought to be doing, and then the purification of the heart. Then he has another book which is for the intermediate level called Minhajul Abidin, the way of the worshippers. And here they say it is the last book that he wrote, and he asked Allah to inspire him with the quickest way in which a person could reach Allah in terms of the purification of the heart. And so Minhajul Abidin was written, the way of the worshippers, in which he mentions 8 obstacles on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and these 8 obstacles need to be overcome. And then there is the advanced book, which is the Ihya Ulumuddin, which is the 4-volume work, very, very, very important book. And that's the bedrock of the people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person has a copy of the book in English, we'll say go straight to the Ihya Ulumuddin. Go straight to the 3rd volume and start reading, start browsing, go through the contents page, or at least have a wird, a litany of going through this book of Imam Ghazali. If the Ihya is too big, or if a person finds maybe the language, and we're not sure if it's really, there's supposed to be a very good translation that's supposed to be coming out. The scholar Mukhtar Holland, I think it was, before he passed away, I was working on a translation. And translations are important because to be able to convey the content, the intent of the author. Otherwise, if there's no complete translation, there has been translation of certain books in the Ihya Ulumuddin. And so if a person finds that the translation is doing the work for them and they are understanding, then they should go through it. And if the Ihya is too big, then Imam Al-Haddad has summarized the entire Ihya Ulumuddin in the exact headings, right, in his book called Religious Counsels. An-Nasa'ih ad-Diniyah of Imam Al-Haddad is a complete summary of the Ihya Ulumuddin. And so if a person can't go to any of those other books, he goes to Imam Al-Haddad's Nasa'ih ad-Diniyah. And then there are other people that have summarized the Ihya in English. The goal is that you get to the point and that Allah has guided someone to go pick up the book and start reading it. This is the first step of the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person is doing this and is able to get the book and able to now start reading about what spiritual diseases are and how to cure them, this is the first foundational step, and it means this person has put their foot on the right foundation. However, if a person just starts wanting to do lots of dhikr and adhkar, and naturally this is sometimes what the nafs wants, right? Because they hear and see about other people that have been doing certain types of adhkar, or they see the effects of adhkar on other people, and the way of the nafs is that they want those effects, but they don't know the heart's work that those people have actually done before, the years and years of heart's work before they actually started doing tons and tons of adhkar and awrad and khatams. And if the society was functioning accordingly, then we wouldn't even need to read the books on the spiritual diseases. We find Sheikh Ali bin Abu Bakr Sakran, one of the masters of the tariq of the Sada al-Balawi, he said, I never knew that spiritual diseases like pride and anger and malice and jealous and hatred and all these things existed until I read them in the Ihya Ulumuddin. Meaning, we ought to be reading these books, working on ourselves, but we have to bring our children up and we have to create a society in which these spiritual diseases don't exist. right? Without the children even having to. So we have to make it easy for the next generation. If we understand how detrimental, or how detrimental, for example, jealousy is, we have to bring our children up teaching them the detriment of jealousy. So they don't have to now go do the hard work and read the books. They've already purified themselves. And if they have to, it will be as an academic exercise in which if they have to teach it to other people. And so this is very, very, very important. And this sentence here, right, needs to actually be spread. People need to inform other people that they know that, the approach to Allah is not through ibadah, first and foremost. Ibadah is the fruit, right, and it's the petrol. But the cleaning, the hard work that needs to be done first is the purification of the heart. So the author says how does a person then start their spiritual path? And look at the importance that he places to certain things which we might regard as unimportant. A person should be mindful of his innermost thoughts and always protect his time. If a person is not mindful of their thoughts and they're not protecting their time, there's no spiritual path for you. In all the ibadah that you do, you can spend an hour doing dhikr in the morning, but if during the rest of the day you have free time which you're wasting, browsing, scrolling, then that dhikr in the morning is not going to have its effect. And unfortunately, this is what we see. People have been doing dhikr for years and years and years, morning and evening adhkar. Where is the of those dhikr on that person? Where is the effects of the dhikr on a person's state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even on their own selves? And so watching one's time becomes very important. And again, we realize how detrimental these devices and social media is, in the internet. A person should be mindful of his innermost thoughts and protect his time. He should not let his heart wander aimlessly, scrolling, devoid of contemplation that seeks to unearth insights and wisdom. Meaning the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in their free time, their time is spent pondering over the wisdom of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they would look for things to keep themselves busy in their free time. Some would read, some of them would author books, some of them would rearrange. We find many ulama, we find, for example, in certain sciences, especially in fiqh, a particular, or there's maybe 20 scholars that have written a book on the same subject. People will disparage and say, why are these scholars all writing the same? And one is, some people write books for the benefit of people, but other people write books for their own benefit. Because when you're writing a book, you understand the subject matter better. This is why some people even translate books, not for the sake of translating and publishing or whatever, translating for the sake of going into the depths of the book and trying to understand. Because when you need to translate, you need to really get into what the author is trying to say. And someone likewise, they can rework a book. They would summarize books. Someone would take this book, for example, even in English, and they would, how can I summarize this book to make it easier for my children to understand, or for myself as reflection points? Meaning, these are the things that ought to take up our free time over and above our work, our job, etc. So a person should be mindful of their innermost thoughts. And the word here also in Arabic for innermost thoughts, meaning there is just the general thoughts that come to one's mind, but the person needs to know deep down inside, what is it that lies deep down in my heart, in my thoughts, because that your thoughts or your heart is as pure as your thoughts. And when that usually happens, when that happens, sometimes when you're dozing off, first and foremost, what you dream about, that's a big reflection about what's in our hearts and our minds. But sometimes when a person is dozing off, if they're very, very tired and they're dozing off, and in these moments of dozing, right, things start happening, you start seeing things in your mind, right? What are those things that come to your mind? And it's not the thoughts that in you is not concerned with something, a very intense action or job or lesson or something that you're doing right now. Meaning you're casually relaxing, and now you're dozing off. What do you see in those moments of dozing? And this shows where a person's heart is. And one of the beautiful things about, for example, in the city of Tarim in Rabi al-Awwal, there are so many gatherings of the prophetic seerah and qasidas that by the end of the month, right, your head is spinning and your heart is spinning just with the amount of qasidas that you've heard, and sometimes the same thing, the same qasidas, same prophetic seerah, what they call the mawlids, recited over and over and over again. By the end of the month, you've almost gone through a complete a shift in which your heart and mind is only about praise of the Prophet ﷺ, right? It's almost like a purifying training ground for the heart and mind in terms of connecting it to the Prophet ﷺ. And a person needs to have, this is why they would do retreats, and this is why they would do the khalwa. The khalwa, or the retreats, was intensive activity just to pound the heart now with goodness, pound the heart. So the thoughts start changing. So he should not let his heart wander aimlessly, devoid of contemplation that seeks to unearth insights and wisdom. Because this is the only reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us our minds, is to be able to understand wisdoms in creation that bring us closer to Him. We will never understand the ultimate reality, but to at least understand the wisdom into certain things, or something of the wisdom into Allah's creation. Likewise, the author says, no action should be without a genuine intention, for intention is the spirit of any deed. And this, when you come to intentions, now becomes a subject on its own. If we go to speak about intentions, it would require volumes and volumes. Suffice to say that intention, the Prophet ﷺ said, all actions are judged by the intentions. And the Arabic word means إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. The literal translation is actions, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. Actions are by intentions. How do you translate that? Meaning there's something in the Arabic which can be interpreted. Actions are judged by the intentions. Actions are rewarded by the intentions. Actions are only according to the intentions. And the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their homes, the children would say that our parents used to teach us intentions like they would teach us Surah Fatiha. What does this mean? How would you teach a child Surah Fatiha? Repeat after me. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. And then you test him. And they would teach the children intentions before you're eating. Make this intention before you're eating. Before you're going to sleep, make this intention before you enter the bathroom. And some of them would even write the intentions on pieces of paper and maybe stick it around the house. Habib Sa'd, one of the ulama of Tarim, he wrote a book called The Book of Intentions. It's a very famous book. Translation exists in English, it's available for download. I think there's even free copies online. The Book of Intentions. And whenever we would visit him, or whenever we would bring any visitors to visit him, right, the thing he would advise constantly was, read this book and browse this book. Go through this book, the Book of Intentions, and you'll see how they actually spend time making intentions. Intentions for attending a gathering, intentions for entering the masjid, intentions for entering the home, intentions for eating, intentions for sleeping, intentions for getting married, intentions for opening a business, intentions for reading the Quran, intentions for making Taraweeh, intentions for going for Hajj and Umrah. And then some students, what they would do is they would take these individual intentions, or for each particular, for example, there's the intentions of eating. They would take the intentions of eating, print it out, laminate it, and stick it into the kitchen. They have intentions that women ought to have when cooking, right? And this should be stuck in the kitchen. But it's good to have it on a piece of paper in which a person can also add. And they would spend more time sometimes making intentions for an action than the action itself. Right? So a person is going to read 2 rakats of salah, and 2 rakats of salah, if it with moderate presence of heart and mind, that can take up to 2 to 3 minutes. But sometimes just the intentions for the 2 rakats of salah, they might take 5 minutes making the intention. I'm reading 2 rakats of salah for Salatul Tawbah, Salatul Hajat, for this particular need, and this, and the purification. And they would go, why? Is because the actions are judged by what? The intention. So what's more important? Is the action more important, or is the intention more important? The intention most definitely is more important. And so they say that you can tell the fruits of a person's actions by the intention they made. And this will make us realize that our entire life has been spent in ibadah without intentions. It means, what is the weight of that ibadah? It might not be having any weight at all, right? At the very least, the person says before any action, I intend what Allah's pious servants intended before doing this particular action. But that's also a lazy, and it's a hack, right? It's a spiritual hack to say, I intend what my sheikh intended, or I intended what sheikh so-and-so intended, or I intend what Habib Sa'd mentioned in his book, The Book of Intentions, right? that still goes. But a person learns to deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they make intentions, because it takes you out of autopilot. Intentions take you out of autopilot, and it brings you back into, why am I doing this action? And these intentions need to be done every single day for every single action. And if they say afatu ni'ma al-ulfa, if the calamity of a blessing is familiarity, then sirru hifdhu ni'mati tajdidu niyya. Then the secret of protecting blessings is renewing one's intentions. What does this mean? It means that you need to be making new intentions every day that we didn't make the day before, or at least every week or every month that we didn't make the day before. For example, when we're eating, what is the intention that we eat with? The common intention is to gain strength to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what are the other intentions? And in the homes, the parents would even ask the children, what new intention did you make today? Or what new intention can you think about with regards to eating, with regards to sleeping, right? And if you realize we're dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would find also some of the children, they only have 2 hours of sleep because of hectic schedule. And intentions, we think of it also as forms of dua. Say, Ya Allah, I only have 2 hours of sleep, but you know I've been awake for your sake. Put the rest that my body would have gotten for 8 hours of sleep into these 2 hours. Is it difficult for Allah to do? Right? So then are we relying on ourselves, or are we relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And likewise, a woman who has to do household chores, what's her intention? We know the Prophet ﷺ also told Sayyidina Aisha anha, when she asked, and she said, the men go out for jihad, and the men do this, and the men do that, and the women are sitting at home. Right? She mentioned all the rewards that the men get for jihad and going out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and spending in the path of Allah, etc., etc. Right? And being with the Prophet ﷺ. And the woman is sitting at home. The Prophet ﷺ told her that she gets the reward for all of that the men are doing if her home is in order, and if her home is amicable, husband is happy. But how many women actually make that intention, that I am cooking today so that whoever eats of my food, inshallah, I get the reward for the ibadah that they do. May Allah put strength, spiritual strength in this food, so that whoever eats my food will be inspired to do good actions and good deeds, and that Allah will make ibadah easy for them. And intentions is an ocean in terms of what a person can intend. And intentions can also lead to miracles. Intentions can lead to miracles. Because who are we dealing with? We're dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many people actually intended? We know the famous, we always mention this hadith on the day of Qiyamah, a person will find in his book of deeds a mountain of charity. And when the angels present this reward of this mountain of charity to him, he'll say, but I didn't ever give this amount of charity. They said, yes, but you passed by a particular town on a particular day that was going through famine. And in your heart of hearts, you had this thought. And again, we're using this word thought because your intentions are your thoughts. You had this intention or this thought or this dua that, Ya Allah, if I had the means, I would feed each and every single person in this town or in this village. Allah appreciated that intention or that thought or that dua from you, and He has given you the reward. What does this mean? We can get rewards without doing even any actions. And that's why we say that intentions are the currency that we deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. Meaning, you've got to stop, spend some time and make intentions. And if a person makes the intention, Niyatul mu'min khayrun min amali. This is another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The intentions of a believer are better than the actions. The actions, there'll always be deficiency. If a person intended, for example, to perform, look how the Prophet ﷺ even taught us. He said, if a person, when they go to sleep, they intend to get up for tahajjud. They intend. Today's times meaning you put your alarm clock, right? You did whatever, you weren't wasting your time on frivolous things before you slept. You went to sleep early. You intend to get up. Now, if we can imagine two situations. One is you got up then at tahajjud and you did ibadah. And the next day you didn't get up, but you also had the same intention, you did the same thing. Which day did you get more reward? The day you got up or the day you didn't get up? The day you got up, your ibadah is according to what you presented to Allah. In terms of your own presence of heart and mind, your negligence, whatever you're doing. The next day, because you intended, but for whatever reason you slept, Allah records a perfect night of ibadah for you. Right? And therefore, even sometimes when people intended to go for Hajj and they didn't get the visa, the Mashaykh would always tell them that your reward for the Hajj, if you see it, you will see the reward for this Hajj which you intended to go for, in which your heart is burning because you didn't get the visa, or for whatever reason you couldn't go, the reward is better than all of those who actually went for it. And all those that went for Hajj would desire on the day of Qiyamah that their visas didn't come through, because your reward now is written as complete from Allah's side. This is how important intentions are. Right? And intentions means we have to stop all the movement. Right? Stop all the just autopilot, and we start making intentions. What does this mean? It means after this lesson we download the book of intentions, and we start perusing it, going through it, and start organizing. What am I doing? And let me look and learn how the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are making intentions. Right? And in Tareem they have a very it's a very nice way in which they make intentions. They would always make intentions through the barakah, the blessings, the secret of Surah Fatiha. So when they would begin any lesson, and they would end any lesson or any gathering, anything that requires even a personal action of ibadah, recitation of Quran. How they would start, they'll say Al-Fatiha. We are going to read Surah Fatiha, right? And through the blessing, we are reading Surah Fatiha with the intention of Al-Fatiha, an Allah taqabbal as-salah. Right? We are going to be reading Surah Fatiha with the intention that Allah accept the salah, and then they start making the intentions. And they would verbally mention all of these intentions. Habib al-Mashhur, even when he would visit the graveyard, he would visit and he would say, before he reads the Surah Yasin, why are we reading Surah Yasin? We are reading this before certain acts of ibadah and worship, before the prophetic seerah. We're going to read Surah Fatiha as an open to this particular gathering with the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connect us to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify our hearts, right? And all these du'as. And they say one of the ways to know, or one of the ways to also approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to learn the intentions that the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make. And when we read and when we listen to the intentions they make, you realize what the goal of life is. And the intentions are always connected to getting complete and perfect sincerity for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting connection to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? For a person to have presence of heart and mind, husnul khatimah, for a person to attain these spiritual stations, etc. And so it means we have to also start learning the intentions. But because this is something that's done so, it's become so part of the life of the people of Allah that to do so, by the way, people don't pay attention to it. Whereas books could be compiled just with the intentions that certain people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made. In the book of Adhkar, the Mukhul Ibadah, which is generally what people go to after the Khulasa, in the end, there are some Fatiha. So in Tarimi parlance, when they talk about intentions, they call it Fatiha. Right? So they will say, make Fatiha, read Fatiha, Rattib al-Fatiha. Rattib al-Fatiha means we're going to make the Surah Fatiha with the particular intentions that I mentioned. And so there are Fatihas in this book, Mukhul Ibadah, in which we can learn how the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the intentions. Likewise, the author says, no action should be without a genuine intention, for intention is the spirit of any deed. A heart empty of insightful thought and righteous intentions becomes like a stray animal, aimlessly wandering. The person then falls into the habit of squandering their time in idleness and finding comfort in the company of the ignorant. This leads to the development of bad spiritual states and reprehensible traits. A rational person must be alert to this and take special care to guard his heart. And we would find that the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would even sometimes not do good deeds because they didn't have a proper intention. And they would sometimes prevent themselves from doing certain types of good deeds because of an ill intention that might have occurred. So how many times would a person, if they're going to go to the masjid and the intention is only to go to the masjid to impress someone, can we stop doing a certain action because we know that we have a bad intention or an ill intention, right? And this also shows, this requires courage. When you talk about courage and bravery is not only physical out there, Can we actually, for example, sometimes the mashayikh would give people, and we find this even in the lives of the Sahaba. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid was made the leader of the army. He was made the leader of the army. And then Sayyidina Umar tells him that now I'm going to change the leadership now. And Sayyidina Umar was doing his own tarbiyah. Sayyidina Umar, why did Sayyidina Umar change him? He said, I fear people will start saying now that the victories that are coming are because of Khalid, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Knowing also that Sayyidina Khalid, he himself mustn't have this thought that the victories are only through me. And sometimes the mashayikh in the tarbiyah, they would let a person do a certain thing, give him a certain project to do. And then they'll tell him, now hand over the project to someone else. Right? To check his intention. This is part of the tarbiyah. We find children as well, even in the household, the father would give certain things. Okay, now give the reward. Okay, now let your brother take over. Or let this one. Again, the courage and the bravery and the valor required for one's spiritual reformation is that, can I stop mid-action because my intention is not sincere? One of the pious didn't attend the janazah of one of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who passed away in his lifetime, and we know the reward of attending the janazah of someone who is accepted in the court of Allah, or someone who is forgiven by Allah, is that whoever attends the janazah is forgiven. Over and above the practice being that, the haqq, the right of a Muslim. And he didn't attend the janazah. When people asked him, he says, I could not muster up a correct intention. Mashaykh would always say, why have you come for the lesson? Have you come just because Shaykh so-and-so is here for the lesson? What is your intention? Because the day the Shaykh is not there, will you still come to the masjid? Will you still come for that particular lesson? The day the Shaykh is there, everyone attends. When the Shaykh travels, and no one comes to that masjid or to that place or to that zawiyah or that whatever it is, means who are we attending for? Are we attending for the Shaykh, or are we attending for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And intentions are not easy, right? It requires hard work. This is the heart's work, and to correct one's intentions also requires bravery and courage. So if a person is not heedful of the intentions, then they fall into the habit of squandering their time. A person also needs to have an intention. As soon as every single time one opens their phone, they need to have the intention. If a person wants to read the news of what's happening in the world, in these wars that are taking place, what intention? Is it just curiosity, or do I intend to learn about the ummah, to be concerned so that I can make dua for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ? When a person is reading someone else's status, right, what is the intention? Is there benefit? And I know this person only posts things which are a waste of time. Do I need to even read it? I know someone else also always posts good posts. What's my intention? My intention is to learn something new. When you're sending a message, for example, Eid Day, right? Everyone received Eid messages, right? And some people, like someone was saying, someone sent a message to a doctor saying something, a hectic situation, emergency, what do I do? And the doctor replied to him saying, Eid Mubarak to you too. Right? You don't read the messages. Meaning, what was the intention? All the people that sent us messages and we replied to them, did we have an intention to genuinely, right, greet them first and foremost in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? And did it have a dua? And did we genuinely hope that this person would have a Eid? Or we just autopilot? Right? And that's for Eid messages. Daily, some people send daily morning messages or du'as. We have to check the intentions all the time. If we pay attention to how important intentions are, then you will realize that it's the only thing, if a person does not yet have openings into understanding the wisdoms of creation or certain insights into different things that Allah SWT has created, then a person will realize that most of their free time, or when you're driving, when you're coming, when you're going, the times where we say is what people would refer to as dead time, right, has to be spent making intentions or checking a person's intentions. Right, you're driving on the car on the way to the talk, to the lecture, to the dhikr, whatever it is. You have to be making intentions. What are my intentions? Ya Allah, accept for me this particular intention, that particular intention. Meaning, you might be driving half an hour to the gathering, you have to be spending your time making intentions. Meaning, a lot of our free time ought to be spent making intentions. And intentions also becomes like the way intentions work is just like a muscle. In the beginning, it's difficult, but if a person is used to doing it, then they become proficient. In the house of one of the pious, they were sitting and eating, and there was a loud sound. There was a commotion, a bang, and whatever out on the street. Might have been an accident or whatever. And so while they're eating, and they would eat around one sufra in one plate, and as they hear the sound, one of the young boys, the son, he gets up and he wants to look out the window. His father grabs him by the hand immediately. With what intention are you getting up? Is it just fudul, curiosity, right? Or you're intending that if there's someone that needs help, I'll be able to help them. And he starts mentioning a whole lot of intentions. Then he says, Dad or Father, in this short time, all of these intentions I need to make. His father tells him that I don't enter and leave the door of the house every day except with no less than 600 intentions. Right? And if a person is used to making intentions all the time, these intentions have become a part of you, then you only need to start making the new intentions, because the old intentions then run through your mind like lightning. All person has to be conscious about all those. And if a person writes the intentions down, one of the ways of even dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for every action, start writing intentions down. Have a note in your phone, on a piece of paper. For example, my intentions for reciting Quran is this, that, khalas. Now when it's time to read Quran, you can say, oh Allah, accept for me the intentions I have in my notes for reading Quran. But you've written it down yourself, khalas, you get the, and you can keep adding. So you might have forgotten certain intentions, but person can do that. What's even better is you take those intentions, you stick them in the beginning of the, keep them in the cover of the Quran. And now when you're reading Quran, you make those intentions. And the ability to stop before the action, knowing that the intention will take longer than the action, the person can do that, meaning now the foundation is firm. A rational person must be alert to this and take special care to guard his heart. Now, there's a difference between an intention and a high hope. There's a difference between a niyyah and an umniyah. So how do we know if a person genuinely has a true intention, or if it's because if intentions are thoughts, then a person can also daydream about something, and they can have a fantasy that I'd like to do this, I want to do this. For example, someone might want to memorize Quran. They've never ever memorized Quran, or never had the opportunity, and they want to memorize Quran. So this is an intention, a firm intention a person wants to make to memorize Quran. How do we know that this intention is sincere or not? Is that when that person has free time now in which they are able to memorize the Quran, what do they do in that free time? Do they waste their time? Right? And if they don't use that free time for that intention, then it's not a pure intention. That's just a high hope. Right? And how many times haven't we thought to ourselves that we would like to do this, like to do that? And the opportunities presented itself, but we never took these opportunities. We'd like to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know the dhikr is taking place, we know the lessons are taking place, we know this is happening, that's happening. We don't intend. And procrastination obviously is the thief of time. It's not just the thief of time, it's the thief of your entire life. It's the thief of your heart and your state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person wants to be genuine on the spiritual path, as soon as that thought comes to do something good, you jump to the opportunity. And you don't allow anything to come between you and, because where did that thought come from? It came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or from the angels, as a door for you to approach. If you don't, the door then closes. Will other doors open? Will the door ever open again? We don't know. And so a person's proof of their pure sincere intention is the steps they then take, what is in their ability to achieve and to actually do that. Otherwise, it's a high hope, it's not an actual intention. It's shaitan playing games with you, or your mind playing games with you. And a lot of us as well, also what we've done to a great extent is we've used what we think are intentions, but we've used these high hopes as a consolation. And we think that, okay, you know what, if I just read these things that come on social media, right? Or if I just busy myself with a little time every day just going through someone else's status or Sheikh so and so's what he said in his lesson today is going to suffice me. And it will never suffice until a person feels and takes responsibility for their own spirituality. Meaning you're not crutching on someone else's path. You're not piggybacking on someone else's program, right? And you have your own program. You can benefit from people, yes, but you have your own program, that this is the most important thing in your life. And people that have their own program, we find them they're not worried about what's trending out there and what's happening. Or Sheikh so and so came today from this country, or this one came, that one came, and like their whole life becomes upside down. They have a set program and they fit everything into their program. Right? There are people whose life is fitting into other people's programs. Right? And there are people who they fit everything into their, just as our salah. Do we organize our life around salah, or is salah organized around our life? And when it comes to spirituality, well, for example, a person knows they have to be reading Quran every day. They have to be reading the minimum adhkar every day. They have to be doing salah on the Prophet. They have to be reading these books every day. Now a family member comes, or they want to go here or go there, or do this, do that. How do we give up our program for the sake of people? Or do we have the courage to people, sorry, I can't attend this gathering. I haven't yet done my hard work today. Or you don't have to tell people anything, sorry, I can't attend, I'm busy. Can we give up pleasures, right? And especially when it regards other people. Because one of the diseases of the nafs is that we keep our appointments with people, but we neglect our appointments with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So we'll cancel our own Quran session. We'll even go late for salah, right? For the sake of a phone call, or for the sake of an appointment or a meeting. We'll never go late for that particular meeting. Whereas we find with the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would sometimes, without, if there wasn't an appointment, right? But they would never give preference to meeting people or being with people over their duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And again, do we have the bravery and the courage to disappoint people? Because it means we need to take care of our own spirituality. Right? And this also means being real with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this means taking responsibility for our own spirituality. One of the ways that shaitan also deceives a person with spiritual circle, and we'll find this happening, is if a person is sincere about the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a lot of, it's a private matter. There's a lot of private time required. The goal of the spiritual path is to be able to spend alone time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to work on your heart, to take yourself to account, to read the books, to do the adhkar. Right? This is alone time. The communal time is good. But if a person has only communal time in which they're doing even good things, but they don't have the private time, that means also that foundation is not a sound foundation. And sometimes people are so scared or so apprehensive of being or of dealing with their own nafs, because it's such a detrimental thing. If they have to come face to face with their own nafs, is that the nafs makes them want to do a lot of things in common. Come, we'll have gatherings, come, we'll have dhikr, come, we'll do this, come, we'll do that, we'll organize this particular function, we'll organize that. It's all good. But what's the intention? What's the reason here? The reason is running away from their own nafs and their own accountability, taking their own nafs to account. And so again, on the spiritual path, these intentions. And a person can only really be sincere in the intentions if they are in quiet time. You can't make intentions in noise. Right? Intentions are almost also taking taking oneself to account every night, every morning. Why did I do this? Why did I do that? What was the reason I went to that? What was the reason I accepted that person's invitation? What was the reason I said this to this particular person? What was the reason I replied? What was the reason I posted this particular status? What was the intention that I posted this particular video, this particular group, etc. Every single thing requires accountability. And the author is going to go into the highest state of the heart, meaning what is the goal of the spiritual path? Everything about approaching Allah, what's the goal? Know that the highest state of the heart is its constant connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the foundation of all righteous deeds and the source of all religious spiritual states. Right? That a person is constantly in touch, connected, right, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning a person has a state with Allah constantly, in that you know and you feel that you are accepted in the court of Allah. And you know, and you feel that you are with Allah in all of your comings and your goings and your thoughts and your deeds. This is the highest state of the heart. And that's why Imam Ghazali also in Bidayatul Hidayah, when he speaks about this, and he's organized your entire time throughout the day, right? And now you think, okay, perhaps some great opening is going to come if I do this for a month or a week or whatever. He says, now continue to do this for the rest of your life. That is the goal of life. The goal of life for the spiritual aspirants is just to be in a constant state in which they are present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything they are doing. And there are different levels also in how this manifests. Doesn't mean a person can't live their life, right? People of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala live their life, but they see Allah in everything that they do. So this constant connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the inner being, the author says, is cultivated by a deep attachment to Allah and falls into ruin through persistent heedlessness of Him. The inner being, meaning this inner being is the spiritual secret. We have the heart, then you have the soul, then you have the sir. Sir is the esoteric secret. This is what the author means here by inner being. How is this? It's cultivated through a deep attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does one attach their heart, their soul, and the esoterics to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And a person will fall into ruins through persistent heedlessness of Him. Because just as a person builds up, if you keep doing something, you become proficient at it. If you keep negligent, then negligence takes over. And so a person has to cultivate their heart, cultivate their soul, cultivate the esoteric secret in being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the purpose of dhikr. But as the author says, a person cannot use dhikr as an approach to Allah unless the heart has been purified. When the heart is predominantly connected to Allah, most exalted, various types of devotion and acts of obedience become easy for the person. This is another sign that a person's foundation is sound. Is that do we have an impetus to do good deeds? Are we moved? Were we moved to read Tarawih? Were we moved to stand up for Tahajjud? Were we moved to read our sunnahs before and after the Salah? Were we moved to want to read our Quran in Ramadan? If we were moved, there was this impetus, meaning the heart is in the place. And if we weren't, and we're lazy and we come to our Salah with difficulty, we find it very, very difficult to do acts of good deeds, meaning this heart is not sound, the heart is not connected to Allah. And also perhaps the intentions that we are doing those things for are not sincere. The person needs to recalibrate. Know that the heart is like a mirror, yet everything it faces is imprinted on it. Therefore, a person should protect their heart as vigilantly as they would protect the pupils of their eyes. We know how sensitive the eye is. A speck of dust, what does it do to our eyes? You can't even function. A thorn, a small thorn, a prick of a thorn, sometimes even, like a shred of glass, it's probably the eye can't even see it. It gets stuck into your finger or into your palm, right? What does it do? It troubles you, right? Do evil thoughts trouble the heart like that? Do sins trouble the heart like that? Right? So the heart is like a mirror, and he says everything faces it. A person should protect his heart as they protect the pupils of their eyes. To bring it home, we say a person should protect their hearts like they protect their screen when they buy a new phone, at least for that first few hours, right? And you see how careful people are when they buy a new phone, right, with the screen and screen protector, and you're worried about every small scratch and every small smudge. But what happens after it gets a smudge and after it gets a crack? The person then neglects it, right? And then that screen. So let's look at our hearts. Do we pay attention to our hearts? And do we protect our hearts as we protect the pupils of our eyes? A dedicated servant should avoid associating with the mean-spirited, foolish or evildoers, as their spiritual states affect the heart and extinguish the light of its inner insight. When you spend time in the company of negligent people, the negligence of their heart flows onto our hearts. And this is why the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would prevent their children from even walking in the marketplaces or even mixing with other people, and they wouldn't send them even to mixed schools because they would be wary of their hearts. They're doing so much work on them at home. If they're in the company of negligent children, the states of those children are going to affect their hearts, right? And we should look at ourselves. How many people are we the cause of the negligence of their hearts? Meaning, how many people do we spend time with? When we spend time with people, do they leave us with the states of our negligence affecting them? Or have we actually benefited them, in which they now are more conscious of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would not even allow their children to go to the other part of town to benefit from one of the big mashayikh, because it meant they had to walk through the marketplace. And they were concerned not just with, it was a very high level in the past, they were concerned not just with mixing of the negligent people in the souk, they would be concerned that by just gazing upon them, something of those would affect them. And the souks of those times, was that the shopkeepers would also be reading a khatam of Quran every week, they would be reading the Dalail al-Khairat every day. The souks of the past were like our masjids today, right? Even the shopkeepers had, they were conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so keeping company is the greatest thing that gives a person impetus on the spiritual path or creates negligence. And again, the company we keep is what we are doing. When you are looking at that video, when you are looking at that clip, when you are looking at that YouTuber, whatever it is, you are spending time in that company. You are that person at that particular time. And their spiritual states, even through the screens, affect you negatively. And this is why it is so detrimental. A person can spoil years and years of ibadah just by following, looking at one particular video with negligence, not having a good intention. Again, if a person has an intention, why am I following this news story? Why am I looking at this particular video? I'm looking at it to learn for this particular cooking lesson. The intention is pure, protect my heart, make sure whatever is being said, what language is being used, perhaps I shouldn't be following this particular person. Might or might not be dressed appropriately, they might or might not be using appropriate language. Over and above everything else, am I watching my heart? How do I feel when I'm watching this? How do I feel when I follow this particular person? And am I aware that my heart is actually benefiting, or is my heart actually going into retrogression? I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Let's check if there's any questions. Okay, the question was about Niya and Umniya. I think we have already spoken about that. Now, the difference of Niya and Umniya is, perhaps if the person must, the intention and the high hope is, the pure intention means that when a person has the ability and the time, they do and they take all of the means necessary to achieve that which they intended. They don't waste their time. We use the example of someone wanting to memorize Quran. Person really wants to memorize Quran, or they think they want to memorize Quran, but they have free time every day after Fajr and they're sleeping. This person is not serious about memorizing Quran, because that time after Fajr can be used memorizing Quran. This is an example. What is the Wird Latif? The Wird Latif is a collection of prophetic adhkar which Imam al-Haddad collated. The Prophet ﷺ had daily morning and evening adhkar that he would do before the sun rises and before the sun sets. And the Prophet ﷺ would read the du'as on a regular basis. Some of them would read them 2 and 3 times. And there are many types of adhkar that the Prophet ﷺ would do even on a daily basis. So over the years, the ulama have compiled different forms of books or compilations in which they collected all the du'as that the Prophet ﷺ would read. And some of them are very voluminous, some of them are less voluminous. Imam al-Haddad collated the shortest possible forms of adhkar in what he called the wird al-latif. Latif means subtle or gentle or small, and a wird means something that someone does every day. And so he's called the wird al-latif, as opposed to his wird al-kabir, which is a much bigger collection. And this is available on the apps. I think Appa Zahira can send it to the students, make them aware of the wird al-latif. There's applications on the phone, there's booklets about it as well, and it's part of the khulasa, which is a collection of daily adhkar which the students in Dar Mustafa and Dar Zahra do on a daily basis. Yes, inshallah, it will be shared via Ummahat. The Wird al-Latif. The Wird al-Latif is one particular compilation of Imam al-Haddad. There are many other ulama, even our ulama. We have what's called the Hizb al-Azam, that our ulama here in these parts have gathered, which is actually the collection of adhkar that they say Imam Abu Hanifa used to do. But the Hizb al-Azam is very large. There's the famous book that people use here called Du'as for the Contentment of the Heart. A lot of it does also contain the Wird al-Latif, but they are very voluminous. The Wird al-Latif is very short, it takes about 10 minutes to read, and if it's read in the morning and evening, it is hoped that it contains the bare minimum that a person should be reading on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is said if a person reads the Wird al-Latif in the morning with Surah Yasin, this is the bare minimum. It's not enough, but it's the bare minimum that one should do. And in the evening, either the Wird al-Latif or the Ratib of Imam al-Haddad. The Ratib of Imam al-Haddad is very similar to the Wird al-Latif and contains many of the similar du'as, prophetic du'as. It's just composed in a more poetic form. بارك الله فيك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. فاتحة الله تقول صلى الله عليه وسلم.